Okay. Have you ever heard anyone speak negatively about doing works? Are works bad? Are works a way for Jewish people to get into heaven? We all like to think that we are safely cradled in the arms of the Almighty God. But how can we be sure? Oh, don't tell me I just know. Don't tell me I just believe. I need something more in a world gone mad, don't you? I need something more when I'm in grief. I need something more to get me through my pain, through the night, through life. Don't you? Do you think any of us will ever reach a point when nothing in life goes badly for us? Is that achievable if we are extremely holy? Is it achievable if we earn 4 doctorate degrees in theology? I'm not signing up for that. The name of today's message is Works. To do or not to do. Please stand and cover yourselves for the reading of our scripture. For those of you who do not know this, uh, we stand as a sign of respect. It's a tradition that was started thousands of years ago. It is a tradition that Yeshua, the man that Christians call Jesus, he did this. All of his Talmudim, all of his disciples did this. The Apostle Paul, his name was really Shaul, but they call him Paul because he had a Greek name, Palos. Anyway, they all did this. This was something that Jews did when the scriptures were read, when someone prayed, and when someone prophesied. All right, so that's why we do it. It's not a law, so I'm not breaking a law by sitting here, but I'm tied to wires, so I sit. So anyway, our verse today is Tehillim. It's known in the Western world as Psalm or Psalms. It's 31:23. It says, Ehevu et Yahweh kol hasidai eminim notzer Yahweh umeshalem al yeter oseh gava. All right, you may be seated. So we're going to begin with, I'm through with this. Think about that a minute. We're going to begin with the first word, Ehevu, which comes from Ahab. Obviously, it's love. To love, to desire, to breathe after anything. The signification of breathing after hints of longing. It's used of friends, one who is loving and beloved. It's to show intimacy between friends, to delight in anything, to do anything, of course. But going back to the friends thing, I actually had a guy pull me off to the side. He didn't want anyone to know he was asking me this question, but he had read some things in his New Testament about these two guys that it sounded like these two guys might be a little light in the loafers, as he put it. No, it's talking about these two men as if they were lovers, way more than friendship here, kissing each other and in each other's bosom, and so I forget what all he said, but I said, listen, in Hebrew, if they called two people friends, that's one thing. If they called two men lovers, that had nothing to do with homosexuality. It had everything to do with uh, intimate friendship. If they used the word for lovers, they were talking about this guy knows the other guy better than he knows himself, and vice versa. There's nothing held back between them. There's nothing in between them a like a couple who is betrothed, right? The woman puts the veil over her face, restricting access. So once the veil is removed, then there's no restriction of access. And they use that same word for friendship to show that there's no restriction of that access. They know everything there is to know about each other. They just know. They're that kind of friend. And that's all that it meant. It had nothing to do with that other nasty stuff. All right, so the next word is et, which in Hebrew has no meaning. It's just a pointer. And then it's pointing to what? God's proper name. Yahweh, the proper name of God. God only has one name. I mention this ever so often, but Rob, I got a book over here that says 78 names of God. I got another book that says 138 names of God. Then I got this other 101 names of God. No, God only has one name. One, just one. He doesn't have any more than one. He just has the one. But he has a lot of attributes. So when they call him Yahweh Shalom, they say that in Hebrew because God has given us peace. If they call him their provider, they call him Yahweh Yirah, not Jehovah Jireh. Yahweh Yirah. That's how it's actually pronounced. Long story how they got to Jehovah Jireh out of that. But anyway, what they did was, so if he brought salvation, they would call him Yahweh Yeshua. Right? Yeah, that's what they did. So those aren't names, those are attributes. God is salvation. God is a provider. God is peace. God is love. God is all these different things. These are all the attributes of God. They're not his name. He only has one, and that name is pronounced as best as we know, Yahweh. And for those of you who are jumping up and down and doing backflips saying you can't say the name of God, well, let me say this. For one thing, the Jews have made God's name vain, utterly vain, because nobody anywhere on this planet has any idea how that name is to be pronounced. Nobody. Now, there's all these people running around saying they do, but nobody does, because the Jews wiped God's name from the face of this planet, thus doing the most taking God's name in vain thing that could ever possibly have been done. So the stupidity behind not saying God's name is just beyond my ability to comprehend. Nobody knows how to pronounce it. The closest we can come is Yahweh. Not Yahweh, certainly not Jehovah, but Yahweh. And since that's as good as I can get, that's what I say. Why? Because to say that God's name is so holy that it can't be pronounced but once a year by a high priest is so far beyond the mind to comprehend that I won't even try. First off, that idea didn't exist until the 1200s CE. If you don't know what that means, it's the 1200s AD. 1200 years after the guy they called Jesus came and did all his thing and had his disciples, and then New Testament coming from that and all that. 1200 years after Yeshua, the guy they called Jesus, hung on the cross. Then they came up with this idea. Oh, no, you know what? That's not right. There is a possibility that it existed as early as the first century. I don't buy it, but there are those who will say it does, because if you look at the New Testament letters, which were supposedly written in the first century, they don't ever say God's name. They call him the Father. They call him the Spirit. They call him the Origin. They call him all kinds of things, but they never call him by his name. So they say. But they did. They just translated Yahweh and gave it the Greek word. I think my mind went blank on that one. I'm sorry, I've gone blank. I can't even think of what it is. But the word means Lord. And since nobody knew what God's name meant, they just gave him the word for Lord, the Greek word for Lord. I do not know how I've gone blank on that one. But anyway, they use that in place of God's name. So you have to understand that there is no doubt in my mind that the New Testament letters were originally written in Hebrew and originally written in the first century. We've never seen those. So since they haven't yet been found, I'm sure at some point they will be. But since they've not been found to date, all we have are the ones, the Greek translations of the original Hebrew text, right? You don't even have an original Greek, for one thing. None of them exist none of them are old. The oldest one we have dates to the 400s, the early 400s. Now, there are people that are trying to be very artistic, shall we say, with their numbering and their dating, and they've pushed it all the way to the 150s CE. They still can't get it into the first century. It's nonsensical. They all come from around the same time the Talmud and the Mishnah were written. Late 300s, early 400s. Hard to say for sure. Because the dating, there's all kinds of issues with the dating. But it's somewhere around that time period that the Greek shows up. And that Greek is more likely to come from the 1500s than the 400s. Because what we have from the 400s are just, what am I trying to say, fragments and stuff like that. And then in the 1500s, some guys came along and translated the Latin Vulgate into Greek, and I think that's what's been shoved back, and they're trying to show us is earlier. And I've said all that to say this. The idea that God's name is too holy didn't come until the Dark Ages, the 1200s. And then in the 1500s, that's when they first started doing Greek. No, Greek did not, they didn't have Greek New Testaments before this time period. What they had was a Latin Vulgate, and no one knows where that came from. So they took the Latin Vulgate, translated it into Greek, and then now they found some little slivers of pieces of skin and perhaps even papyri that date as early as the 400s. But they have no full-size pages. They don't have the whole thing. They'll have, and most of that's very questionable in the first place, because you tell me how verse 1 is on the front and you flip it over and it's verse 2. Come on, people. You should know better than this. But we're accepting it because it's old. Well, all right, good for you. So I'm saying that it probably didn't exist until the 1200s, even if it existed in the first century. Here's the problem I have with it then. There, in the New Testament letters, they talk about kings and slaves. Think about this, slaves who actually pronounced the name of God out loud. It's in the letters. They talk about them calling him by name. Foreign slaves calling God by name. That had to be a very commonly used word for that to have happened. So they didn't have that issue at this time period, which is why I say it doesn't belong in the New Testament letters either. And it doesn't belong in our modern culture. Because if God's name is so holy that it cannot be pronounced, then God's words, the words that came out of his mouth that were written on a piece of paper, those words can never be read because they're too holy. Come on, we could go on and on and on with this it's too holy thing. God gave it to us so we would know it. And if we say it because we are intimate friends with God. If you don't claim him, you don't know him, you know nothing about him, maybe you shouldn't say it. I'm just saying. But to say God's name shows that you have at least some level of intimate knowledge of who he is. To not say God's name is to show that you don't know God at all. Because he didn't give us a name so that we could make it known. Anyway. The next word is kol. It means all. It's totality. That's all you get out of that. Then it's hasidai. Interesting word. Ever heard the word hasid? Hasidic? It comes from this word. Hasid. Yeah. Saints. And in this case, hasidai of all his saints. His saints. Wow. So like St. George and St. Christopher and St. Dupas, those are all God's saints. Come on, let's look at what this word means. It's someone who is kind, someone who is something that is excellent. They use it of that. Used of God being merciful and gracious. It's used of pious. They use the word pious. Remember in the 1800s when this was written, my source for this information, but just in this English, don't know. The word pious was it was like a code word for Torah observant. They didn't want to put Torah observant in there in that time period, so they said pious. But that's what they were doing, is replacing the words Torah observant with pious. So it said pious toward God, so it's Torah observant to God. This is of pious followers, so it's followers of God who were Torah observant. Worshippers of Yahweh, it says, the saints of Yahweh. So here's the thing that we have to understand about this word. The Hasidic Jews of the first century were nothing like the Hasidic Jews of today. The Hasidic Jews of the first century, well, I shouldn't say none of them. I mean, maybe there are some today that are like the first century. I've not met any or heard of any, but there could be some. I'll put it that way. But the ones in the first century time period, these were the people who lived according to the Torah. They did not mind that there was an oral tradition to help them not break the laws in the Torah. They didn't mind that at all. What they didn't like was people trying to use the oral law as superior to the written, or use the oral law as a replacement. In New Testament, a Brit Hadashah, to say it right. Yeah, because there were those who were doing that. They were, this is our law now. We've gotten rid of God's law because that's the olden stuff, and this is our New Testament. That's the old covenant. This is where the Christians got this idea. They got it from the Jews, because in the first century there was a split between the Hasidic Jews, the ones that they call the Hasidim, and the ones they call the Perushim, or the Pharisees. The Pharisees, for whatever reason, the Hasidim had basically changed their name to the Pharisees, the Perushim. They had changed their name. Don't know why. No one knows. It's not written down anywhere that we know of. It probably is. We've just not found it. So at this point, we don't know. But then you get to the point where now they're using, the oral law trumps the written law, and so the oral law says you don't have to, or that you're not allowed to eat lamb on Pesach. Well, now you got a split. Now everybody's saying, I'm going back to the Hasidic, because the Hasidic don't put up with that. The law says you will eat lamb on Pesach, and it never gives any exceptions to that law. It doesn't say, well, now if they tear down the temple, or if they don't have any temple priests, you can't do it. No, it doesn't exist in the oral law. And probably in the first century, that law didn't exist either. It does now, but I doubt seriously it did in the first century, given that there was a temple in the first century. I'm just saying. So this was probably not one of them, but it's a good example of the type of thing that happened. The oral law becomes, it usurps. It says, okay, you can't have lamb now because there is no temple, there's no temple priest to look at your lamb and confirm that it's good. Well, there weren't any temple priests to confirm Cain and Abel's sacrifices, were there? Yet one was punished and one was killed, but the other was punished. Why? Because he didn't give the best, right? So it was apparently on the person's shoulder to get it right, not the priest, just saying. And when God gave these commands, you realize when God gave the command to eat lamb and all that, there wasn't a temple. In fact, it would be a while before there would be a temple. And God knew the temple was going to be destroyed, because I'm telling you, God did not slap himself on the forehead and say, I didn't see that coming. I really thought that temple was going to last forever. Come on. What are we bought into here? Say God's name. But these people, the Hasidim, they followed God's law. That's what our group does. We follow God's law, and nothing is above God's law. All right, so then it says Emunim. You probably recognize Emunah, Aman, right? Faithfulness. And this is in plural. This is the masculine plural. This is faithfulnesses. Properly, it's to prop up, to stay up, to sustain, to support. You know, like you build the skeleton wall, and you see the guys lift it up, and then they have the boards, the 2x that they put up sideways, and then they nail it to the floor to hold the wall up. Those prop up, they sustain, they support, right? And then when they put the plywood around it, they put the roof over the top of it, those walls prop up, sustain, and support the ceiling. The ceiling does not support the walls. I actually, in this very trailer that I'm in right now, we started working on it, and we started tearing out underneath the wall because the floor was missing, and I needed to we were literally by hand having to chisel the wood, and the 400 Brazilian staples, like this long. Can y'all see that? 2-3 inch long staples that they just took the gun and just went every square inch of this place. It was horrible. But we're having to take a hammer and a chisel and chisel all this out underneath the wall. So at some point, we've got a area about 14 feet long where the wall's not touching the floor, and it's still there, and the ceiling is still up. And I said, how is that possible? And this kid from Russia looked at me and said, maybe the ceiling's holding it up. I missed that kid. He was so funny. I think he was joking too, but I don't know. But it was actually the outer sheeting of the house was actually holding it up anyway. It's not important. It just was a funny story. So this is something that props up, sustains, it supports. It's to carry a child in the arms. And I love this story. It's one of my favorite all-time stories. When my daughter was born, they actually allowed me in the room, and I got to help with the delivery. Got to help pull her out, which was nasty and gross. I still get the willies every time I think about it. But then they wanted me to cut the cord. I was like, I draw the line there. I am not cutting the cord. I can just see myself killing my own child. No. So I didn't do that. But then they laid her down on this little table thing. It was actually like a bar. It was way up high. And it had this little heat lamp. It was, it's like, what is she, a hamburger? Anyway, it was to keep her warm. And so they let me give her her first bath. I'm going to talk to her. She's like 5 minutes old, and you wipe her all, I wiped her all down, and then they picked her up and they wrapped her up in this little cloth, and then they stuck her in my arm, or they handed her to me, and I'm holding her way out here like this. I was freaked out. I've never held a baby that small before. Didn't know what to do, and they're like, and of course, she starts flailing her arms and starts saying, "Wait, wait, wait." I was one of the really, really, really lucky ones in this world. My baby gave crying no effort. That was all the effort she would give it. So that was wonderful at night. But anyway, they were, "What are you doing, you crazy fool? You don't hold a baby like that." And they turned her sideways and they put her in there. Pretty soon she started doing this little number and got herself all comfy. That was me carrying her in my arms. That was me propping her up, sustaining her, supporting her. That was making her feel safe, right? And all of this is part of the meaning of this word. This all fits so perfectly with this word. That's why I bring it up with this word as often as I do. So it's one who cares for a child, also one who guards and brings up. I'm guarding a child. I brought her up, sustained her, nourished her. I founded her. I built her up. I gave her a foundation. At least I tried, right? To be stayed up has to be firm and unshaken. So if you give your children a good foundation, you see, the Bible says that if we raise them up in the way that they ought to go, and this is the part that the Western world doesn't really understand. They don't understand what the way is. Oh, sorry, hold on. Oops, I hope that wasn't something important. Okay. I'm pulling a Hillary Clinton here. Okay. So, when the children of Israel were in the wilderness of Sinai, Moshe came to them and asked them if they would follow a certain set of rules and regulations and let God be their God and they would be his people. So they heard him. It was a verbal uh, question. It was a verbal agreement. And they all said, "Hey, sounds good. Let's do it." And so Moshe goes up to the mountain. He's with God for 40 days and nights. It's a long time. Everything's always 40 days and nights with God. That's right with this story, right? I don't know. Who knows? It's something like that. He's up there for a long time. Pretty soon, somebody says, "Hey, let's get Aaron and make us a golden cow, and we'll worship the cow because Moshe took off. We've not seen him. He took the money and run." No, actually, they all had the money. He left. We don't know whatever became of him. He's just a man. Let's make ourselves a god, and they did. So God tells Moshe, "Moshe, you better step back. I'm pretty mad right now. I'm afraid my anger might actually fry you as I fry these people for what they've done." And he said they have turned quickly out of the way. Look it up. God said they've turned quickly out of the way. And what's the way? What did they just agree to do? They just agreed to live according to the Torah. And now they're down there worshiping idols, making them and worshiping the idols, which is to turn from the way. Not to live according to God's law is to turn from the way. So when the Bible, the Jewish Bible, says, raise them up in the way that they ought to go, put two and two together. You know that raise them up to be Torah observant, right? You don't raise them up to be Christians. You don't raise them up to be atheists. You don't raise them up to have possibly, let them decide. No, you raise them up in that way. You are commanded to raise your children, because if you don't, like an old professor of mine used to say, if you don't raise your kids, the devil will. Now, I know in Judaism, fundamentally, we don't believe in a devil. I get that. But you do understand that if you don't teach your child right or wrong, somebody else is going to, and their idea of right or wrong is probably not going to be yours. Why do you think so many parents are so freaked out when their children turn out so different than they are? Because they didn't teach their children to be what they wanted their children to be. You don't leave it up to the child. Anyway, so they had turned from the way. And so if you're going to set your child on the path, if you're going to give them a path, a way of life that they can lean on, where they will not be shaken by the things that hit them in this world, you might want to consider raising them according to the Torah. Metaphorically, to be faithful. To be faithful is to lean and confide on anyone, to trust, to be secure. So when they talk about faithfulness and people being faithful in the Hebrew Bible, I need to make people understand this Bible belonged to the Hebrews, not the Christians. When they said that in the Hebrew Bible, what do you suppose the foundation was? Faithfulness was generally only spoken with respect to Torah observance. There are times when they were using it as, you're a faithful friend. Does not mean that you're a Torah observant friend, though it could be. It doesn't necessarily mean it just means you're a friend that's always there when I need you, right? So they do use it in that way from time to time, but almost, and we're talking like high 90s percentile. This is coming from the guy that's translated it, so I guarantee I'm close to right on that one, because I am making up the percentage here. Just thought you should know. But I guarantee it's the high 90 percentile rate where they are, when they say that you're faithful, they're talking about your Torah observant. To be being faithful to live out the Torah in your day-to-day life, that's faithfulness. The word used in this way was no doubt chosen because the Yehudim, the Jews, believed that Torah was the foundation of life. It sustained and supported those who lived according to it. All right, so let's go on to Notzer, which is keeps, to watch, to keep a vineyard, to look at. It's like to keep a vineyard, to tend to it, to watch or defend over a fort, to keep, to observe a covenant, so to keep the covenant right, to keep, to hide, in a bad sense, to observe, to observe guilt, to besiege a city. It's in the bad sense. And then we have the proper name of God again, Yahweh. Then it says, Umeh Shalem. Of course, you hear Shalom, right? It is and complete. It's to be whole, sound, safe, to be completed, finished, to have peace, friendship with anyone, that kind of thing. This isn't your word shalom. It obviously comes from shalom. It's that same root and all that kind of stuff. But in this usage, it's to be whole and to be finished, to be sound, to be at peace, you could say that. And it says all in Hebrew, which means honor upon. Then it says yeter. It's not yetzer, it's yeter. It's abundant. It's a cord, a rope, properly something hanging over, something that is redundant, so-called from hanging over or hanging down. So you think about, you take a rope and you tie something together to hold it together. You know that little piece that's left over? This is the word for that. This is yeter. This is the abundant. This is the leftover. It's what wasn't actually needed. It's used of the cords which, in pitching a tent, fasten the curtains to the stakes, of the string of a bow, of a cord used as a bridle, of a rope used as a bridle. Abundance, abundantly, very abundant, enough and more, remainder. But to get the idea from the left, there's leftovers, so there's abundance. That's what we should get. It is from the root yatar, which is to be redundant, that which is left, the rest. Hence, to abound, to be over and above, to be left. It's not like what we think of in the Western world as abundance. It's just what's left over. But have life more abundantly. A cord, a rope, properly something hanging over, redundant. Why is that all saying that? Used as a cord. I don't know why that's there. Forget about that. Then it says oseh, which is doer. It's from asa, obviously. Properly to labor, to work about anything, to make, to produce by labor, to manufacture, to fabricate. Get ideas. You're making something, you're building something, you're carving something. Used of a ship, an altar, of bricks, of garments, of a booth or a tent. Use of God to produce, to create as heavens and earth. To make anything, to produce it from oneself is an expression used of living creatures. In other words, if an animal is producing milk, they produce it from themselves. To make fat on the loins instead of a man growing fat, you're producing fat because you're eating too much. It's actually in the book. In like manner, trees are said to make fruit because the fruit comes from their branches, right? So, to acquire by labor, to make a living, to prepare, to make ready as food, to make or prepare a victim to be offered to God, to prepare the animal for the sacrifice, to make, in other words, to keep a festival day as the Shabbat, the Pesach, also to pass or spend time, to abide, to stay. I wonder if there's anything else. Nah, let's just skip the rest of that. This is Ga'ava, proud, elevation, hence magnificence, majesty as of God, ornament, splendor, pride, and arrogance. So you got a good side and a bad side, right? You got the good side where they talk of God as being elevated, he's high and lifted up. They talk about him being magnificent, and he's majestic, and he's adorned with splendor and that kind of thing. But then you got the negative side where it's pride and arrogance. And then there's an example given on the negative side, Psalm 73:6. Therefore, pride clothes their neck. An idiom, right? Pride is clothing their neck, is the idiom for a stiff neck, being regarded as the seat of pride, used of the sea of mountains. Because it's, their pride is great, like the sea. Their pride is great, like the mountains. But so it's of good and bad. And we need to know that. So here's my amplified translation of Tehillim with Psalm 31:23. Desire and long for intimate love of God. All those who possess an eager pursuit of him stemming from an intense, burning, passionate love and desire. That's that word love. That was something that I missed on that one. To love someone, to desire someone. It's one of the notes that was given in that dictionary, the Jacinius, was that it was an eager pursuit of someone stemming from an intense, burning, passionate love and desire for them. Right? So they're comparing that love of God to that. Yahweh tends to, watches over and defends those who are propped up, supported, and carrying in his arms, repaying in abundance to exceeding measure those who produce, manufacture, and fabricate pride and arrogance. And here's the regular translation. It'll make a little more sense. I got it from the JSB. Remember, with Tehillim, that's Psalm 31:23. So love Yahweh, all you faithful. Yahweh guards the loyal, and more than, what's that? How do you say that word, Donna? Requites him who acts arrogant. So it's saying, love God, all you who are Hasidim, all you who are faithful. Yahweh guards the loyal, those who are loyal to God, and more than punishes, more than pays back those who act arrogant, those who are full of pride, right? So that's the way it was translated. But here's an alternative translation. Love Yahweh, all you faithful. Yahweh guards the loyal, and more than rewards the proud doers of works. What? Come on, Rob. How can you be right and everybody else is wrong? Well, why don't we take a look at something from the Sefer Shelahim? Oh, no. Let's look at Yaakov. They changed his name to James in honor of King James. Let's not honor the man who followed Yeshua, the brother of Yeshua. Let's honor the king. They didn't even want this translation to be done. He wouldn't even authorize it. They said it was authorized. It says it right in the book, Rob. Yeah, but read the letter James wrote himself. He said, I will not authorize this. Anyway, it's James 1:23. We begin with the first words are ode in Greek. It's but whatsoever. Then it says parakufas. Now this is a Greek word. It's to look. It would be the Hebrew word shakat, to lay upon, to lay over, especially planks and beams, to cover with planks, to lie out over everything, especially in order to look out. Hence, to look out, to look forth. It's how they look out or you look out. Anyway, also used of a mountain which hangs over a region. Because it'd be like a lookout. You go up high and look out over the whole region. To look forth. God from heaven is said to do that. To look forth from a window. Now this word is in nifal, so it's to lie out over anything in order to look out. Hence, to look out, to look forth from a window. Also use of a mountain. I've said all those things. They say it's long and at the same time bending. It is of the neck of an ostrich, used of a tall person who hangs down his head, right? It's taking that head, looking around the corner, you're looking, what is that over there? What do you got down there? I can see you, right? Anyway, so hopefully you know what I'm talking about. Then it says ace in Greek, which is into. Then it says nomon, or nomon, rather, not nomon, nomon, from, that's the word for Torah. That's their word for law. Instruction, doctrine, human as of parents, because they give instruction. Divine through prophets and law, because they give instruction from the Torah. The manner and principles which men follow from the Torah. Divine, the book of the law given at Sinai, that's the Torah, right? It's from the root yara, which is to cast, to lay foundations, to found, to sprinkle, to water, properly to throw water, to scatter drops. If you're casting it, you're throwing it, right? But think about this founding and this laying a foundation. You see why the way is the laying of the foundation of the Torah? All right, then they say teleon in Greek, which is, we would say perfect. We'd say in Hebrew, tamim. Perfect, complete, whole, entire, sound, free from blemishes. Used of sacrificed animals. It's to be safe and secure of men. Whole, upright in conduct and blameless. Right? Anyway, so then it says tone, taste, which is of the, then it says elu terias in Greek, which is liberty. We would say chapash in Hebrew, to be loosed, free, opposite to that which is bound, restrained. To spread out loose things on the ground. To prostrate, hence to be weak and firm, as if with one's strength loosened. To set free, to liberate, as in a slave. All right, so this is chi, which is and, it's a conjunction. Then it says paramenos, which is continued. We would say amad. We've had this word. Well, no, we haven't. We had Ahmad. Okay, so we haven't had this word. Ahmad is to stand, like Ahmad Rashad. You ever heard that guy? Yeah, his name is Hebrew. I wonder if he's Jewish. Anyway, it's to stand, to set firmly, to sustain, to prop, to stand before a king. In other words, to serve, to minister to the king, to be set over anyone, to confide in anyone, to stand by anyone, to defend him, to stand for, to stand firm, to remain, to endure, to stand firm, to resist, to persist, to persevere, to keep a covenant, and to stand to it. to remain in the same place or state, use both of persons and things. To stand still, to stop, to stand. To stand up, brother. Arise, to be constituted, set, and appointed. That's what our Constitution was supposed to do to us. And it did for a while. But now they don't follow it anymore. Just saying. Then alk is our next word in Greek, which means not. It's the negative article. Then we have akroatais in Greek, which is hearer. We would say kashev in this case in Hebrew. It is from the root kashav, to attend to anything, use of the ear. The original idea is that of sharpening, to prick up the ears, an expression taken from animals. So you've seen dogs do it. Just all of a sudden their ears are popped up. They start doing that number, right? This is the picture behind the word. So it's to pay attention. That's really what they're trying to tell you, is that somebody's paying attention. Then it's in Greek, epiles montes, or forgetful in English. We would say shachach in Hebrew, to forget, to leave something from forgetfulness. Men are often said to forget God or the law of God, and leave it off, but forget about it. Then it says genomenos. Genomenos. Sounds like Geno, doesn't it? It's being. We would say haya, to be, to exist. Was, is, will be. Those are the words that you would translate from that. Then we have Allah. Not that Allah. This means but. Not this, but that. Not this, Allah, that. That word. So then it says poiestes, doer. Oh, now we have had this word. Ose, asa, to properly, to labor, to work about, to make, to produce, to manufacture, to fabricate, use of ships and altars and bricks and garments, of a booth. It's use of God to produce, to create, as in the heavens and the earth. Remember that? For the animals producing milk, trees producing trees, that kind of thing. So we've already had that word. Then it says ergal, works. Works. Melacha in Hebrew. Properly service. Hence work prescribed to anyone, especially of the work of an artisan. The property or wealth of anyone, especially cattle. It is from the root la'ach, which is to send a messenger, to be sent, to wait upon, to minister, a servant. And then we have altos, which just basically means this or this one thing. Then we have makarios, which is blessed, not barak. This is esher, happiness, found only in plural construct, so it's happinesses. It's constructed in plural to give it emphasis. In other words, it is an explanation point. It is from the root ashar, which is to be straight, right, especially used in a straight way. Hence also of what is upright, erect, whence comes the signification of firmness and strength. To go straight on, and generally to go, to be successful, to prosper, to be fortunate. Then it says ente, which is in the, and then it says poiese. We've had this word, it's deed. Ose, properly, to labor, to work, to make, to manufacture, to produce, to fabricate. Animals with milk and trees with fruit. There's your word again. Says that a lot, doesn't it? This is altau, which is his. Estai, be, that's the haya word, the is, was, will be word. And then, here's our amplified translation of Yaakov for James 1:25. But whoever stretches his neck and turns to look into the perfect liberty of Torah and stands firm, not being a forgetful hearer, but manufactures and fabricates the works, this one is happy in his work. Woo! Okay, here's the regular translation, my translation of truth. But whoever looks into the perfect liberty of Torah and continues. But whoever looks into the perfect liberty of Torah and continues, not being a forgetful hearer, but being a doer of the ma'asim of Torah, the works, this one is blessed in his works. What is it going to take for us to shift our focus from the deeds of the wicked to the deeds of our God? Why is it so easy for us to forget that we serve a good God? I think it is because we have never truly been sure that God was going to punish those who persecute us. Can't be sure about it, right? I think it is because we did not know if it was all right to think that way. God's going to get him. There is a good pride and a bad pride. I'm absolutely sure of it because I'm proud of my children. I'm proud of my grandchildren. It shows in the way I light up when they are around. It shows in the way I talk about them to others. I know this is pride, and I know there is no sin in it. I also know that when God created the earth, everything, every step of the way, he would stop, he would turn his neck and look back at it and say, this is good. In fact, the word he used really means this is perfect. So God was proud of what he did. I hope we all know that nothing goes unnoticed by God. Nothing done to us and nothing done by us. If we become lifted up in our own arrogance and deceit, we will be rewarded abundantly for our sin. Those who are lifted up in arrogance and deceit against God or any of his children will receive the same reward. What side of the fence do we fall on? Are we filled with pride, arrogance, and deceit? Or are our ears pricked up? Is our neck turned hard to see what the Torah will teach us next? Are we finding freedom from our bondage in the Torah? Are we standing firm to what it says, or are we picking out what we like and soothing over the rest? The only thing God ever asked of us was to enter into covenant with him and to live by the rules of that covenant. We all know that as a rule of thumb, the church flatly rejects the Torah. But I am not talking about the church. I'm just talking, it's just us. Just us chickens. Nobody else is here. How committed are we? What price are we willing to pay for true happiness? If we are to have the abundant life that Yeshua spoke of, we will have to put some pretty serious effort into the study of the Torah. Intimate knowledge of the Torah brings happiness. This is the abundant life Yeshua came to give us. Prick up your ears, turn your head, and find freedom. Real freedom. Freedom that only comes from the perfect, spotless Torah. Shalom, Shalom.